Looking back, we were very much a brand that was born on Instagram. In the early days, like we really, and we still do, heavily engage with our community to get feedback on what to launch next. So whether it was a color or a style or a category, customers love to tell us, and we were able to respond really quickly.
You're listening to Retail Remix, your inside access to candid conversations with the people shaping retail's future. Here's your host, Alicia Esposito.
The one thing I remember about shopping for bridesmaids dresses is that the process always felt a bit overwhelming. So many designs, so many possible colors, and it just took so long to really find what I was looking for quickly, easily, and at a decent price point. Honestly, that was the experience that Grace Lee Chen and Monica Auscher had, and that's the reason why they started Birdy Grey. So today, I wanted to sit down with them, dig a little bit deeper into how they started the brand, why they started the brand, and the evolution that they're seeing in the retail and wedding industry in particular, how they're using these insights and customer behaviors to really shape not just where the brand is going today, but where the brand could go in the future. If you listen to this show, you know I always love sitting down with founders who can share not just the brass tacks of what it takes to run a successful business, but also the inspiration behind why they started their business. And this is no exception because Grace and Monica have a great story to share. Grace, Monica, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to chat with you and learn a little bit more about Birdy Grey today.
Thanks, Alicia. Really happy to be here.
Thanks for having us on, Alicia.
So we have a lot to dig into, but let's start by talking about the big aha moment. And by that, I mean the origin of the brand, why you decided to start the business. What experiences inspired you to come up with the idea for Birdy Grey?
I'll take this one. So I'm Grace. I'm the founder and CEO. I got the idea to start Birdy Grey back in 2017 after having been a bridesmaid many times myself. The first time I was a bridesmaid was in my early 20s, all throughout, until my mid 30s. And I just realized that the bridesmaid's dress shopping experience was just old, confusing, and needed to be changed. I just saw a major white space and decided to go for it. For a little more context, my background is in fashion and editorial. So I started out my career at InStyle magazine, where I was a writer and reporter, and then I went in-house to do social content and media brand marketing for a couple of fashion and beauty brands. And so, I kind of got like the itch to start a company. I just didn't have a great idea until I realized that, wow, bridesmaids dresses are just kind of a category that needed to be changed up. And so I wanted to start it by, introducing Birdy Grey, which was very simple. It's direct-to-consumer bridesmaids dresses that are affordable and flattering.
I love it. And I know that is something that many of my friends, as well as myself, have experienced firsthand, that the process feels overwhelming, that, the style options sometimes are leaving a lot more to the imagination. And, it just seems like you guys are really trying to democratize that experience, make it easier, and also make the process a bit more fun for everybody, which I think is definitely needed in this space. But what I love most about your story is that you are real life besties, and I love stories of like friends coming together and really starting a business, driving change for a respective industry. What made you both feel confident that that friendship could translate effectively to becoming co-founders and business partners? Because like obviously you may love someone as a friend, but when rubber hits the road and you have to build a business, sometimes that can get a little bumpy, so to speak. So how did you go through that process, and how did you find the ideal fit for you both in terms of what roles you would play and how you would kind of fit into the quote unquote corporate structure, so to speak, of Birdy Grey?
Yeah, I think before we decided to start the company together, many people had warned us, going into business with a friend is tough. But I knew that it would work because Mon and I, first of all, we've had a very long-standing friendship. We met in New York City in our early 20s. And so we had this inherent sort of friendship and trust. But more importantly, I think we have very different skill sets, which has really served us well in building the company together.
I totally agree. I was going to say that it's interesting because Grace and I have almost no overlapping skill sets. So I think it kind of lends itself to not having to kind of lock horns on certain topics where we sort of naturally have more competencies. And also just as friends, like we never really had drama. So if there was like any friend I would ever consider going into business with, it would be Grace. I think we just have like a very harmonious and different sort of personality types, and it just works.
Yeah, I love that. It seemed like it just like all the puzzle pieces kind of fit into place, which is definitely, it's like a kismet of sorts, which I love, especially when you can support each other as friends and also elevate each other's ideas and skill sets in a way that makes sense for the business. But I do want to talk about business growth, right? We have a lot of other founders, brand leaders, marketers, and I feel like what makes your sector, in this case, the wedding industry, so interesting is that it's kind of a community of its own, right? Whoever is participating, whether it's brides, bridesmaids, family members, etc., everyone is really like passionate and eager to share their experiences, their learnings, and really just like kind of cheer each other on, which is actually kind of enlightening and nice. And I'm curious how that plays into your business and how you're building the brand, because I could imagine it's such a big opportunity to harness that community and really tap into that willingness to share. I mean, can you share any insight into how you try to incorporate that community aspect or even elevate it to drive and support the Birdy Grey business?
Sure. After spending the last 7 years very closely sort of talking to brides and those in our community, I've learned that if there's one group of people who love to share about their experiences, it's brides. Like people love thinking about their big day. For so many people, it's like the biggest, most special moment of their life. And so it's been really fun to sort of build community with brides as they're planning their weddings online. And then more importantly, after the wedding, people love sharing their photography with us and their content with us. It's been really fun. If you search the hashtag Birdie in the Wild, you'll see hundreds and thousands of pictures that people have tagged us in featuring their bridesmaids dresses, which is great to see. I'd say overall, our customers have had great experiences with us and love to refer their friends. Oftentimes, like in a group, you'll have multiple people getting ready, and we've had really great referrals, and we're starting to see repeat purchase behavior in our sales metrics, which is great.
Oh, that's great. And community can kind of show up in different ways, right? Like there are the external communities, which are obviously found on social media, the Knot, Wedding Wire, etc. But then you also have your own internal communities that you can nurture through your own channels. So how do you kind of harness those? How do you extract data and insight from these communities and turn it into something meaningful and actionable for the business, whether that be marketing, product, or other decisions that need to be made?
Yeah, I think from a decision-making perspective, we very much like live and die by data. And so much of the information that we use to make decisions comes directly from our communities, our internal ones, as well as just looking at the general population of brides, right? And that generation has kind of changed over the last 5 years, but we obsessively survey. So, we do huge panel surveys of the US population. We also survey customers. We talk to our own customers. And a lot of that has actually driven decisions from what styles should we introduce, what colors should we introduce, to where do we need to invest in our operations, to what new categories should be next that we tackle, or what customer service policies should be changed. It could be as simple as doing like an Instagram poll where we flash like different inspiration and we see instantly what customers are resonating with, or something a lot more exhaustive and scientific. But I feel like relying really heavily on speaking to the communities that matter to us have really guided how we win with current customers and then how we win new ones.
No, that's great. And what about like how you tap into insights and data to unlock new inspiration or ideation, even like at the product level? Because again, kind of going into like my own personal experiences with like planning my own wedding and helping my friends and family plan their weddings, I feel like social media in particular has kind of like unlocked this whole new level of creativity in the wedding industry, right? Like for so many years, it was confined to, media, editorial, et cetera. And now we're able to, I think to a point earlier made, is that people can share their photos and their own experiences. And then that kind of creates this snowball effect of sorts. Like that's how new trends are made, right? And I think that's what makes it so exciting, right? Like there are no like firm quote unquote rules anymore, especially with fashion. So what have been some of the most significant changes that you've realized over the past few years, especially around the role that social media is playing and the opportunity that exists for your brand in particular?
Yeah, looking back, we were very much a brand that was born on Instagram. In the early days, like we really, and we still do, heavily engage with our community to get feedback on what to launch next. So whether it was a color or a style or a category, customers love to tell us, and we were able to respond really quickly. So an example of that is one of our best-selling colors today is sage. And sage was launched because so many people had asked for it in the early days. And so I love that. We have a really strong community on Instagram. But like looking ahead, TikTok is obviously a platform where a lot of people are planning their weddings. Wedding Talk is like a whole community, and we're really tapping into developing content and partnering with creators to develop content for us to share how they're sort of planning their weddings, which has been really successful. I'd also say with TikTok, we're seeing trends go viral a lot faster. And what's great about Birdy Grey is that we are able to respond very quickly. So an example of something that went viral is Dylan Sprouse and Barbara Pelvin got married, and their bridesmaids wore just like a smattering of icy pastel bridesmaids dresses. And we saw that, and I was like, oh my God, we need to launch like an icy pastel collection. So that just launched a couple weeks ago. Sophia Richie's wedding was another wedding that went viral on TikTok. And that trend was, black bridesmaids dresses. And so we were able to react quickly, build photo shoots and content around that trend. And it's great because not only because we're a smaller company, we're able to respond quicker and we're able to get those insights a lot faster.
I love that. I think any way that, a brand can move swiftly and respond to some of these trends and show the audience like, okay, we can be a part of this. It's this whole idea of, how do we participate in the culture, right? And how do we adapt our business, our products, our experiences in a way that really, really resonates, right? And I guess it ties to this idea that social media has made building a brand so much easier than in the past, right? Like there are always like certain guardrails or, it took a lot of time and money and effort to really start to build a brand presence. And like that's exciting and that's great, but it also makes it challenging to stand out, right? So how do you ensure that Birdy Grey continues to differentiate and stand out in this era of social brands, right? And where we're surrounded by options and content and resources. Like, have you had to evolve your value prop at all? Or have you had to evolve your messaging in order to stand out? I know that that's probably a very loaded question, but anything key that has really driven your brand forward over the years?
Yeah, I'll say when we first launched in 2017, what we were doing was quite disruptive, like bridesmaids dresses that were ready to ship online for a disruptive $99 price point. Today, it's not as unique, but I think what we continue to do well is being very customer centric and listening to our customers to stay on top of trends, making sure that our assortment is broad and inclusive and evolves with our ever-changing customer. Like our customer has always been 28 years old, but it's like a revolving door of, new brides. And so for us, it's just really staying on top of what she wants. And the only way to do that is to hear it directly from the customer.
And it's interesting, Alicia, I would add that, you asked if our value proposition has evolved. If anything, I feel like as we've grown as a company, we've often been asked, like, are we going to expand into general evening wear? Why don't we cater to prom? Or because you guys are obviously doing something right in the dress market, like what's next for our growth? I actually think that the reverse this year is, I think, staying true to our original value proposition to be laser focused on our customer and specifically on this moment around bridesmaids dressing is what makes us continue to be successful because we really cater to the bride versus, I think, general retailers that pop up and are kind of dipping their toe in and out of the space. I think we very much stay loyal to our true mission of catering to the bride.
I actually think that's a really important point because we've seen so many brands try to diversify, expand their product mix, go into new categories. And like to an extent, like, yes, absolutely, that makes sense. But in your world where like this is something you do so well, I think that idea of like staying in your lane, so to speak, it is actually really powerful. And it shows that you're not only really good at this thing, but you're committed to staying good at this thing. So I think that's a really important takeaway and distinction for probably a lot of our listeners that are thinking like, what does our path to growth look like, right?
Totally. And I
Totally.
think the more that we continue to build on that as we kind of get more years under our belts as a company, I think the more kind of respect and credibility we have as authorities in the bridal dressing space, which I think is another sort of way to differentiate ourselves from, a random person who's cropping up with a new wedding trend tomorrow as just sort of a Me Too brand.
No, that's great. And, obviously taking all of the nuances of the wedding industry into account, that consumers in general are just always evolving, like how they're finding brands, how they're shopping in general, right? Like we've heard so much about the shift from traditional search to TikTok and even marketplaces, but even just like their general expectations of that experience from a product standpoint, a pricing standpoint, and an experience standpoint. So I know we've talked a little bit about how you use data and insight, but are there any other methods or strategies of like how you're continuing to understand that evolution of the consumer and how you're ensuring that you're always adapting to resonate with them?
Yeah, I can think of one really good example of how we're trying to understand how our customer is evolving. There's this behavior. I mean, obviously, we live in an Amazon world where people expect to have their product immediately, coming from like the legacy industry where you would wait 8 to 10 weeks to get a bridesmaid's dress. And I think we as a company are trying to experiment, and there's no better data than your actual sales data to see like who needs what and are willing to pay for what. So I think the blend that we have in our inventory mix of things that are ready to ship and will come to your house in 3 to 5 days versus things that are made to order, which is like sort of the more traditional way that bridal players have served this market. We have a bunch of our styles and colors made to order as well. And we're continuing to refine sort of what that looks like. It obviously has huge implications for our supply chain, but ultimately the customer votes on what they need and how quickly they need it or what they're willing to wait for. The other example I was going to mention was just our customer tastes are definitely evolving. So, there's still the traditional floor length chiffon gown. It's like a tried and true. There's plenty of brides that still love that look. But we're also finding that brides are evolving and want something a little bit more sexier, a more modern sort of sleek look, which is why, our satin collections are doing so well too. So as we grow as a company, we just need to cater to sort of those evolving tastes a bridal standpoint.
Oh, that's great. Any other like goals or priorities that you both, as the founders have in mind from a brand growth or even just like a business perspective? I mean, what I find so interesting about retail is that it is always changing. There are so many aspects that influence it, whether it be consumer-based, technology-based, even economic-based, right? So is there anything that's top of mind for you both right now?
Yeah, I would say one of them is just focusing on operational excellence. So, doing things faster and better is a huge focus for us. Like we're still a relatively young company and we definitely make mistakes at times, but I think we spend a lot of time really trying to refine our internal processes and build more of a foundation so that there are no hiccups for our customers on the big day. So everything from leveling up our quality assurance from what is sort of industry standard to something that's even like more robust because we've learned the hard way that like we just can't make mistakes. Like the colors have to be perfect, the styles have to be perfect. So like upping our QA team is sort of like one initiative. And then also just trying to figure out how to shorten lead times, right? Because the 8 weeks that we offer today could definitely be faster. And so we're working on that. Another area is just our site experience. So we want to have a really beautiful tailored site experience that feels very special and bridal, but is also really easy to shop and fast. So that obviously takes a lot of investment on our end. And then the last thing is just, continuing to grow our non-dress category. So we do like a really lovely robes and pajamas and loungewear business. It's probably still in its early stages. So we're definitely growing that as we scale the core business.
Wonderful. And, obviously we do have a good number of brand leaders and in some cases founders that are listening to this show. And even if folks listening are not in those positions, I think it's always inspirational to learn from other entrepreneurial minded folks, at least around, what they have learned in their journeys and really some of the key lessons in the process. So what have been some of your most critical lessons learned, especially when it comes to the brand building side? Because again, the wedding industry is so interesting because there are so many trends impacting its growth growth and its evolution. And there are so many options, right? So are there any final takeaways, tips, lessons that you can share with our listeners today?
I would say for me, just remaining customer centric, really listening to your customers, getting their feedback and actioning it will go really far when you're building your brand. So I think, the benefit of being a startup is that you can be nimble and react quickly without having to go through all these layers if you're a larger organization. For us, we have a whole team dedicated to building out like this really robust customer feedback loop where we're gathering customer feedback across many different platforms, whether it's email or social or on third-party sites, and sharing back with relevant teams. That has really helped us a lot to build a much better, excellent customer experience.
And I think from my side, I think one of the lessons that we continue to learn is trying to find that right balance between, speed and scrappiness versus process, infrastructure, technology, right? So when you're a $5 million brand, you can't do things the quote right way and have all these fancy systems and have a beautiful, underlying tech infrastructure and all of that, because it's just, you got to move faster. So a lot of the stuff might feel very stapled together. But then, of course, later you're dealing with tech debt and eventually you need to invest at really key times. So just being smart about making those trade-offs and finding the right time to slow down and build a foundation, but also knowing when it's okay to do the workaround method.
Yeah, I think that's a very important balance, right? Because I think the value of being a digital brand and using all of these incredible tools, whether it's social media or elsewhere in your marketing stack, it's like you can have that speed and agility and be able to hop on what's trending. But Monica, to your point, I think having a sound operation, I think a lot of our listeners are learning that, having all of your systems in place and having good processes, just to ensure that you're as efficient and effective as possible in all areas of the business is really important. So that is a great takeaway. And I really appreciate you both taking the time out. I mean, it's not often we get to have brand founders on the line sharing their stories and their experiences. So I appreciate you taking the time out and sharing a little bit more about Birdy Grey.
Thanks so much, Alicia.
Thanks so much, Alicia. This was such a pleasure.
And to all of you listening, if you have any follow-up questions for Grace or Monica, we would love to keep the conversation going on social media. We are on LinkedIn at Retail Touchpoints, as well as on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Our Touchpoints. Share your feedback, share your experiences shopping for a bridesmaid's dress, share your thoughts on how this industry is evolving. And of course, if you have any firsthand experiences with Birdy Grey, would love to hear that as well. And of course, if you have any thoughts and feedback on this episode or the show as a whole, leave us a rating or review on your preferred podcast player. We are on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, frankly, anywhere else, we're probably there as well. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the show. We are speaking with folks like Monica and Grace weekly, digging into the trends shaping the future of the retail industry and the customer experience. So when you subscribe, you get the latest and greatest delivered right to your device. But for now, that's it from us, everyone. Thank you again to Grace and Monica, and thanks to all of you. We will see you next time. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on your favorite podcast player. Until next time, keep mixing it up.